Urszula Dudziak. The queen of jazz and a revolutionary vocalist, she was the world's first singer to use transducers and live vocal looping. Urszula Dudziak is mad about sounds. She can emit an almost infinite variety of unconventional ones, using her 5-octave range and formidable talents as an improviser. However, what Dudziak does is more than traditional jazz scat singing. Thanks to the electronic sound transducers she employs during her concerts, she can imitate any instrument in the world, lending her voice a startling new dimension. Singing this way lets me communicate with the universe. My sounds soothe people and make them happy, she says. Leonard Feather, a British jazz critic, wrote in the 1970s that Dudziak brought the human voice into the space age. Born on the 22nd of October 1943, at the village of Straconka, today a district of Bielsko-Biała, Urszula started singing early on, took up the accordion at the age of 4, and was tutored by her mother on the piano, an instrument she later studied at music school. I was 14 when I first heard jazz on the radio, she recalls. This was Jazz Hour, a Voice of America program hosted by Willis Conover. Urszula sang along to the broadcasts, dreaming of becoming another Ella Fitzgerald. In 1958, when the famous Polish composer and jazz pianist Krzysztof Komeda visited Zielona Góra, where Dudziak spent most of her teenage years, she sang him jazz standards based on Ella's interpretations. Komeda was so enchanted that he immediately invited her to perform with him on stage. In Warsaw, she performed with Poland's greatest jazz musicians at the Hybrydy Club and sang for Edward Czerny's Polish Radio Dance Orchestra. It was at Hybrydy that Dudziak met her husband, Michał Urbaniak, who became one of the founders of jazz fusion. Just 15 years later, in 1973, the couple was sitting on the sofa of Conover's New York home as he told Dudziak, "Ola, I'm going to play your Newborn Night album on Jazz Hour tomorrow night." Recorded with pianist Adam Makowicz, Newborn Night was Dudziak's breakout album. It marked the first time she experimented with her voice, which has been her hallmark ever since. She discovered her own style by accident. She plugged her microphone into some electronic distortion devices Urbaniak was collecting to use on electric guitars. Dudziak was spellbound by the sound effects she could achieve. To this, she added live looping, which allowed her voice tracks to be layered over each other. This way, she could use her voice to reproduce an entire orchestra, including rhythm and backup vocals. She used this technique to perform Ravel's Bolero, for example. Dudziak was the world's first musician to incorporate live looping into her performance, paving the way for instrumentalists, especially bass players, who soon adopted the technique. In 1973, Dudziak and Urbaniak moved to the USA, where Michał chased his dreams of fame, and Urszula chased her husband. Their timing was perfect, as American critics enthused about Urbaniak's fresh and original compositions, which drew on Polish folk melodies while using American sidemen to ground them in an Afro-American soul and blues-based rhythm. But when the couple went to see John Hammond, the legendary Columbia Records producer who discovered Aretha Franklin and Bob Dylan, among others, it turned out that he was more interested in Dudziak's Newborn Night than the tracks recorded with Urbaniak. After listening to it for 2 minutes, Hammond said, "Sorry, Michał, but Urszula's going first." And my album was the first to get a US release, reminisces Dudziak. Urbaniak's album Fusion, which also featured Dudziak, came out a year later. Downbeat, the world's leading jazz magazine, gave Newborn Night its maximum 5-star rating, extremely rare praise at that time. Urszula and her husband were accepted into the family of top US jazz stars, performing at Carnegie Hall, opening for a Herbie Hancock tour, and appearing with Weather Report and Chick Corea. In 1976, Dudziak recorded a worldwide smash hit, Papaya, inspired by her wordless vocalizing exercises. In 1979, the Los Angeles Times named her Singer of the Year, while Downbeat rated Dudziak the second best female jazz vocalist, right after Ella Fitzgerald. In 1983, she joined the Vocal Summit Project, bringing together the world's top 5 young jazz vocalists, including Bobby McFerrin. McFerrin joined Dudziak as her performing partner for Warsaw's Jazz Jamboree in 1985, a concert she still sees as the most important in her career. Her husband Urbaniak had at that time left her and their 2 young daughters. Dudziak had arrived in Warsaw without any supporting musicians except for McFerrin, who was still little known in Poland. She worried the show was going to be a disaster. When they went on stage and started singing together, however, the audience went wild. The concert made me 100% certain that I would keep on singing. It was like coming home after a long journey. I felt that from now on, I could charge ahead boldly, she says. Dudziak embarked on one-woman show concerts and received invitations to perform together from Dizzy Gillespie or Ron Carter. In 1987, she sang with Sting and the Gil Evans Orchestra at the Umbria Jazz Festival in Perugia. She has released several dozen albums. In 2016, Dudziak was named UNESCO Artist for Peace, the only Pole to date with the title. She sings constantly and loves playing tennis. Her optimism is contagious. She says life shouldn't be lived with full stops, only commas.